Marcus Rivera had worked the night shift at Agro Financial Tower for 11 years, and in all that time, he had learned one thing above everything else, that the building had a heartbeat of its own after midnight. The elevators hummed, the heating vents whispered, and the marble floors held the echo of every footstep like a secret. He pushed his mop bucket down the 42nd floor corridor with the quiet efficiency of a man who had made peace with invisibility, nodding to the security camera out of habit, humming softly under his breath. His daughter Sophia was asleep at home with Mrs. Delgado next door, watching over her, and that thought alone was enough to keep him moving through the long hours. He had raised Sophia alone since she was 3, working double shifts when the rent crept up, skipping meals when the math didn't work, never once letting her see the weight of it. Tonight felt like any other night, until it didn't. At the far end of the corridor, near the executive conference suite, he heard it. A sound so small it barely registered at first, like a bird caught behind glass. He stopped. He listened. Then he moved toward it. The conference room door was ajar, and through the narrow gap he saw her, a girl, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside one of the tall windows, her knees pulled to her chest, rocking back and forth with her eyes, squeezed shut in a way that told him they had never truly opened on the world. She was blind, and she was terrified, and she was completely alone. Marcus stepped inside slowly, the way he had learned to approach Sophia during her worst nights. No sudden sounds, no sharp words, just presence. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, it's okay. I work here. I'm just the janitor. My name is Marcus." The girl's rocking slowed but didn't stop. "I can't find my mom," she whispered. "She was in the meeting, and then I got lost, and I can't find—" Her voice fractured. Marcus looked around the room, thinking fast, already reaching for his radio to call security when his eyes landed on it. A sleek, black grand piano positioned against the far wall, the kind the executives used for client events and charity fundraisers. He had dusted its surface 100 times. He had never once touched the keys. He looked back at the girl, still shaking, still lost inside the darkness of her panic, and something older than logic moved through him. He sat down at the bench. His hands found the keys, the way hands find things they have never forgotten. Because Marcus Rivera had grown up in his grandmother's house in San Antonio, where an old upright piano had stood in the living room like a member of the family, and where he had played every evening until the world took him in other directions. He had not played in nearly 15 years, but the music remembered him. He began with something gentle, something his grandmother used to play on slow Sunday mornings, a quiet, rolling melody that had no name he knew, just warmth and steadiness built into every note. The girl stopped rocking. Her head tilted slightly, the way people do when something unexpected reaches them somewhere deep. Marcus kept playing, letting the sound fill the room and soften its edges, watching her shoulders drop by degrees, watching her breathing slow from ragged to steady, watching the terror on her face give way to something quieter. "That's pretty," she murmured after a while. "What is it?" "Something my grandma taught me," he said without stopping. "She said music is just feelings that learned how to travel." The girl almost smiled. She unfolded herself from the floor and sat upright, her hands resting open in her lap, listening with her whole body the way only people who truly hear can listen. Neither of them noticed the woman standing in the doorway. Catherine Hargrove had been in the building since 6 that morning. She ran Hargrove Financial from this tower, managed 400 employees, had been featured on the covers of 3 business magazines in the last 2 years, and had never once in her professional life felt tears threaten her composure in a moment she hadn't chosen. She had spent the last 40 minutes in controlled, silent panic searching every floor for her daughter Lily, who had wandered away during a bathroom break while Catherine's meeting ran catastrophically long. She had rounded the corner, fully prepared for the worst. What she found instead was her daughter, calm, safe, and luminous, sitting on the floor of the conference room, listening to a janitor play piano with the hands of someone who had once held an entire world in them, and simply set it down without being asked. Catherine did not move for a long time. She stood in the doorway with a hand pressed to her mouth and let herself feel every second of it, the relief, the gratitude, the staggering, humbling recognition of what she was witnessing. When Marcus finally looked up and saw her, he stopped immediately and rose from the bench. "I'm sorry, ma'am, She was upset. "And I thought, don't," Catherine said, and her voice was not the voice she used in boardrooms. "Please don't apologize." Lily turned toward her mother's voice and reached out her arms, and Catherine crossed the room and gathered her daughter close, holding on with the kind of grip that only comes after genuine fear. Over Lily's shoulder, she looked at Marcus with eyes that said everything a thank you could never quite carry. Marcus nodded once, the way quiet people do when words would only make something smaller. He picked up his mop and moved toward the door.
"Sir," Catherine called after him.
He turned. She was still holding Lily, but she was standing straighter now, and there was something resolved in her expression. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he said. "Rivera," she nodded slowly, and something shifted behind her eyes. Not pity, not charity, but the particular recognition of a person who has just understood that they have been seeing the world through a lens that was too small. Marcus returned to his corridor, his mop bucket, his quiet rounds. He had 3 more floors to finish before sunrise. But somewhere in the 42nd floor conference room, the echo of his grandmother's melody was still traveling through a little girl's memory, through a mother's rebuilt understanding, through walls that had only ever heard the language of power and had just, for the first time, heard something truer. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs it today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories, where every story is a reminder that quiet souls carry the loudest grace.